Hey, this is Anney.
And Samantha.
And welcome to Stuff Mom Never Told You, production of iHeartRadio. It's Thursday, so that means it is time for another happy hour.
Happy hour.
Yes. Welcome, everyone, no matter what day of the week it is, as you listen to this.
Yes.
Yes. As always, drink responsibly if you choose to do so. This is really just a space where we want you to hang out with us and try to find a moment of relaxation.
Yes.
This is a special episode.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, because we're introducing a new subsegment of these happy hours that I'm calling Spoiled Thursdays.
Well, and I would also like to put this in here. This is a subsegment of a subsegment.
Yes. So it's a subsegment.
Like we have the happy hour, and then there's Annie's Corner having the happy hour, and then there's Spoiled Thursdays.
Yes.
In that one. There's another part would be called the unhappy hour.
Yeah. So I've got a lot of subsegments going on here.
I like it.
Yeah, I like to keep you all on your toes. But yes, in Spoiled Thursdays, we're going to talk about more recent pieces of entertainment. So if you don't want to be spoiled on that piece of entertainment, wait till you catch up and then come back to us. If you care about being spoiled, because some people like Samantha
I like it.
Don't really mind. Before we get into it though, Samantha, what are you sipping on this happy hour?
Today, I am drinking on our local brewery, Monday Night Brewery's Nar Water, which is their version of hard seltzers. And this flavor is key lime cherry. So you would hate it because you don't like fruit. Actually, this is not supposed to be artificial, though.
I might like it.
Necessarily. Yeah, they use the real fruits and such. A little jammier. So I'm going to go ahead and open it for you. So if you don't like listening to cans being open, skip 5 seconds. It's spewing. I got it. Everything's fine.
Yes. Sounds like everything is going swimmingly over there.
What are you drinking, friend?
So I wish I had recorded myself making this because in honor of today's episode, where we're going to talk about the Disney Plus show WandaVision, I made a drink I call the Scarlet Witch. Ooh. Actually, I only am calling it that for this episode, but I used my famous, in my book, color-changing gin.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah. You put some butterfly pea flowers in gin, and then I put edible glitter, and you let it do its thing. And then when you put it in, if you add any acidity, like lemon or lime juice, it changes colors.
Oh.
So it's some of that, and then I put in a lot of lime, and then cranberry juice, and then finished it out with sparkling water. So it's a nice, Samantha can tell you, it's a reddish color.
Yes, it's light red.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise could be seen as kind of pinkish.
And it's really delicious. I didn't want to put in that much cranberry juice to make the color that I wanted.
Yes.
But the idea is there.
It's there. I like it.
Yes.
It's
a
pretty.
Nice, tasty drink. It's very lime. A lot of like sour, tangy lime notes happening.
I love that.
Mm-hmm. All right. So yes, we are going to talk about the Disney Plus show WandaVision. So we're a bit behind the times. That feels like forever ago when that was coming out.
But really wasn't. Let's go ahead and preface that. A. B. Again, we were debating on whether or not we want to do spoiled anything because people do get very upset. I just read the Reddit section of Am I the Ass?
Yeah.
And they were talking about a dude who goes to happy hours and such just to spoil things for people. And is a jerk about it to the point that he will find out what you're reading and then look it up in Wikipedia and tell you about it, even though he hadn't actually read it, because it just brings him joy to make other people miserable.
Mm-hmm.
And so people take this stuff really seriously.
Yes.
Which is why we were like, do we? Don't we?
Yeah. But there are so many things that we want to talk about that are current. And I do think there's been movies on the back of my mind that I feel like there's a really great feminist conversation behind them. And then we have, originally it was going to be Spoiled Saturdays.
Yeah.
So this has been a long time making.
Yes. And there's a lot of requests for you to give your opinions on these shows and movies. So also, we do hear you all.
Do.
So here we go.
Yes, we do. But we definitely don't want to be that guy at the bar.
Right. Don't be that coworker, people.
Spoiling happy hours. I had a friend that did that to me with the last Harry Potter book, but the best part was he messed it up. So I was really upset and I cried and cried and cried because he told me the ending. He flipped to the last and told me the ending. But it didn't end at the part he flipped to. It kept going.
Right.
So he was wrong. Thought you got me.
Joke's on him.
The joke is on him. Okay, so the very brief plot of WandaVision is, let's see how to explain. It's a weird show. I'm going to say that at the top. But basically, it's dealing with grief. And the premise is sort of, you see Wanda Maximoff, or the Scarlet Witch, she gets that name throughout this show, in a very idealistic suburban neighborhood with her husband Vision and later her 2 children, and just sort of these like increasingly weird events happening that are like, okay, something's going on here. And then every episode is a different decade of television kind of being represented, and usually a specific show or sitcom. So it's like, I believe it starts in the 1950s and then it goes up to the present. And this takes place after the most recent Avengers movie, Endgame. Then you get to see, yes, there's something happening outside of this like perfect bubble, or in her head, perfect bubble she's built herself. And there are characters that we've seen from previous Marvel movies like Darcy. You've got Monica Rambeau. Yeah. So that's the plot in general. And then we wanted to talk about one of the most interesting things I thought about this show when I was watching it is because it does take place through the decades. You do get to see these stereotypes around women on TV throughout. And it's especially like at the beginning when it like the 50s women. And of course, in the back of your head this whole time, you're thinking, well, isn't Vision dead? Like, how is he here? But yeah, especially like right in the beginning when you would see Wanda trying to fit into this, stereotypical 50s housewife trope. And it just felt weird to see her trying to do that because you know her as a superhero, as one of the Avengers. And now she's like trying to run a magic show and keep her powers hidden and making cakes.
Right. Chickens.
Yeah.
Lobsters.
Right.
Rabbits.
It's been a minute since I've seen this show, so I feel like you could make something up and I'd be like, when did that happen?
No, the rabbit was the main Catherine Hahn, Agnes, or Agatha, her pet.
Oh, yeah.
Which I think has a bigger plot point in the comics, but it is in reference to in the show.
Yeah. So there is Catherine Hahn. Some of the actors in this, Catherine Hahn played Agatha. You have Kat Dennings as Darcy, Teyonah
Who's
Parris.
dating Andrew WK.
Really?
Yeah. Threw me off.
Threw me off too. You have Randall Park.
Love him. Love.
He's fantastic.
Love.
And then, yes, you do have Elizabeth Olsen as Wanda Maximoff and Paul Bettany as Vision. And then randomly, Evan Peters.
Yes.
Does show up.
I feel like he was just such the throwaway character. Like, I get what they were doing, but the climax was so anticlimactic that you're like, oh.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. No, it was exciting, but it did feel kind of anticlimactic to me. That is no shade on like anybody who was super excited about it or even the plot line, but I was kind of like, oh.
Well, I mean, because not to go too forward, but like in the end, he really doesn't have a lot of significance as you would hope for. It's almost like tongue in cheek, and you're like, maybe I'm missing something, because there was all these indications of the crossover of the universes. And I know people, because I had to come to you like every week. I think we had to sit down about it. But I thought maybe that's what was happening. But in the end, it was just like kind of a throwaway character of, I'm not supposed to be here. My name is so-and-so. Ralph. I'm Ralph.
Yeah. Yeah. These universes are so big. And now that Disney has 20th Century, they have their own X-Men. As you know, I could talk about this and I confuse everyone forever, but there's all of that going on. So it is hard to say. Like, maybe it will be something different when whoever next decides whatever storyline's going to go and be the canon.
I will say there was some crossover, and I don't know if it was purposeful, between S.H.I.E.L.D., Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., and this show. And I really like Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. I will say I haven't been able to watch the last 2 or 3 seasons because I kind of got, disenchanted with it, I guess is the best word. But like a few things I was like, oh, that I restarted watching some of the Agents of the Shield, and I was like, that person is in this one, and this one, like because my stupid, useless superpower is that I can recognize people and know where they come from, but I may not know their names.
Right.
So I'll have to look it up, but I have a really good recollection of faces and what other shows they've been in.
Yeah, I can attest that this is true.
I'm weird on that one. But yeah, I was able to do that between the two shows, which made more sense since it is an interlocking world, sort of.
Yeah. And one of the interesting pieces of news that came out recently, because we all were, in part because the cast and crew were teasing us about it, waiting for this huge cameo, and it never really came.
Right.
And they recently said, well, we didn't want to bring in Doctor Strange and be a white guy savior, like coming in to save the day. And I was like, well, it didn't have to save the day, but all right. I appreciate the point.
They were trying to pretend Evan Peters, right? Because the other part was that it was could have been
like an alternate unit, like the multiverse.
Right. Well, Paul Bettany was trying to tease and say, oh, I was talking about myself.
Mm-hmm.
I know that. But I was like, why?
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I guess maybe it's what is it, White Vision at the end?
Yeah, like he comes to himself and that he comes back. And I guess he's out there in the world and has collected all of the original Vision's memories.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean he's Vision, obviously.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember when that was the next day, that like weird thought experiment was trending on Twitter, and I was like, what the? But then I watched the episode, like, oh, okay. Twitter is so weird.
There it is.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of women and feminism, I do think like the whole seeing how women were represented over the decades in sort of that quick succession, it was pretty jarring and pretty like, oh, wow, yeah, the 90s was still real messed up, huh? Just all of that. And then I did feel like we should talk about witches, because that did end up being kind of the big reveal, is that Agatha/Agnes is this witch, and she was in this coven that tried to kill her, or restrain her, at least, like restrain her powers, and then she ended up killing all of them. And it has been sort of controlling this whole thing all along to get to Scarlet Witch's power, or Wanda's power. And I had so many friends. I hate to be this person, but even we talked about it before this happened, where if you know the comics, unless they are taking a big diversion, you're kind of like, yes, that's what's going to happen. But I had some friends who didn't know the comics, and they were so disappointed because they were like, I wanted Wanda and Agatha to go be witches together, like be best friends.
Didn't one of the comics actually have them doing that? Like she was a mentor.
Yes.
She was a mentor for her. So that's what I like. I'm hoping that it grows bigger, because Catherine Hahn ends up being alive. She's less power, but she ends up being alive, of course. Mm-hmm. So, of course, that gives her an easy pathway into this world. I really hope, because Catherine Hahn is a treasure. She is a freaking treasure.
Yeah.
So is Randall Park. They are freaking treasures. Mm-hmm. They should remain in this universe forever. So I hope that's the case, that they will bring that about. But yeah, in the comics, originally she was a mentor and not necessarily someone who was a nemesis, as painted in the show.
Yeah. And that's always been one of the hardest sells for me, which is funny because I love like supernatural stuff and witches and all that. But it feels kind of odd in this universe, especially if you're talking about like the cinematic portion of it, where even if it's like ridiculous movie magic science, it's still kind of like science. And now it's like witches.
Right. But I mean, isn't that the whole point was that her power didn't reveal itself until she was experimented on.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's complete, like, just disconnect in my brain. Right. It makes sense. But for me, for some reason, I'm like, we're going back to the Salem witch trials.
So does it make it, and this is a question, because I think it's purposeful, obviously, in what they are trying to do, especially with the pandemic and quarantine and the way they're releasing things. Of course, they were always intended for WandaVision to be a little series and then moving on to the big screen. But do you think them doing that made that gap even more like apparent for you?
Oh, yeah. No, I don't think so. I really think this is just a total hang up of mine because like I was that way with Thor, where I didn't really care for Thor until Thor Ragnarok, which there are a lot of reasons for that. It is not only because of this sort of God element, but it just kind of felt like, okay, this seems it like is an outlier and it stands out. But it totally makes. I mean, it's like in a universe where anything can happen. I don't know why this is like
Right. This is the one thing that you don't believe. Everything else is fine, plausible. But this witch thing, hell no.
It's totally my own problem. I know it is.
Well, and I will say for me, who again, I do things based on entertainment and not necessarily because of love. So I would not try to insult anyone who is into these comics and who have grown up with these comics and who feel really hard alliances and allegiances to specific things about the comic. I did find it really entertaining. And I think it to me, again, like the whole, you wait for the special character, that was unnecessary. Why they needed to do that. Had they been quiet, I think that would have been less jarring. Especially with Evan Peters showing up. Don't get me wrong. I was like, what? Look, he sees Quicksilver from this, and trying to explain to my partner who was watching it with me, who is not as good at putting two and two characters together, as well as the fact that he falls asleep in the majority of the movies we watch. But like, it still was not the impact that they, I think, were trying to tease. B, again, the ending just didn't mesh. I was like, that was it? That was the whole, that was it. Okay, cool, I guess. But for me, like as, again, a spectator of just enjoying it as entertainment, I really did enjoy it. I did have a hard time with the first two because it was so slow in build up. Looking back on it, it's not. But I know that was a trend in all of Twitter. People were like, okay, what is happening? Is it worth continuing on? Do I need to keep watching it? And everybody's like, no, it gets better. And then again, as you were saying, the whole plot of grief, we can all, especially this last year, unfortunately, we can all understand that depth of pain and trying to work that out in ourselves and trying to work through it and what that looks like to work through it, or if you can work through it. And also this whole overlying arc of the evil dude manipulating. And I'm talking about the director. Manipulating her grief for power. And that's a whole different level.
And I think I'm assuming it was purposeful, but to have a character, you have Monica Rambeau, who lost her mom, and then you have, Darcy, and then Randall, Jimmy, running around, and they're all marginalized people or minorities, and they were the ones that were like, no, she's grieving, like we don't have to attack her. Like she needs help. And she did.
Also, there's also underlying manipulation. Some white man is doing this.
Yes. And I did want to touch on that very briefly because Samantha and I watched one of the Halloween episode together. And there is a line in there where the director calls Monica sassy. And we both looked at each other like, is this like a sassy black woman trying to get her to shut up when she's totally right? And then I did think it was interesting. There was a lot of conversation around the costuming in it, which I know I've talked about a lot before, but I think hasn't been as recent. But like back when Bridget and I did the feminism of Star Wars, I talked about that a lot, about the importance of costuming. And Elizabeth Olsen was really vocal about she wanted the original Scarlet Witch outfit in there. And that was in the Halloween one. But then at the end, when she gets the new outfit and you see this big fight between her and Catherine Hahn in the air and they're so powerful, that was cool to see to see these two women. And Catherine Hahn, by the way, is also in Spider-Verse. And I kept being like, is she?
Oh, yeah, she is.
Is this a multiverse with her?
But she is Dr.
Octopus. Yeah, Doc Ock.
I'm having a moment because of James Bond and Octopussy and just the sexism in that I don't like that title in general.
Sure.
Whole different conversation. But yeah, I completely forgot about that.
Yeah, well, that's because right when all that happened, when Evan Peters was on and then Spider-Man had just come out. They cast Alfred Molina to be in the new Spider-Man with Tom Holland. And they've already said it's a multiverse. And J.K. Simmons showed up in the last Spider-Man movie. And so that's why it was kind of like an extra layer of, well, wait, what's going on here? Because are you doing a multiverse thing? Because you've already said you're doing that. But is Evan Peters part of that?
Yeah. Who's doing this? Where is it coming from? And again, like, I think people were expecting Doctor Strange at one point because that is also a part of the comics. So this is how... Okay, I must ask, because I'm a spectator. I feel very much enjoying what I'm getting. Mm-hmm. How much disappointment do you have when it doesn't follow the script of the comics? Or are you glad it doesn't happen?
I am actually really happy you asked that because I have a lot of thoughts, but I try so hard not to be that person. I'm not a big protector of it's only this and I'm going to be super disappointed because I just think that's not a fun way to be for you and for anybody else. But like, you're not going to enjoy things, especially in a huge sprawling universe like Marvel, like where one character could have had 15 different plot points at some point. So I don't usually get mad at that as long as, and this can get really tricky in Marvel, if I feel like they get really far off what the heart of the character is, that's what bothers me.
Yeah.
Like if I can convince myself, I think, maybe this isn't what happened in the comic books, but I can see this character and their motivation doing this in this situation. So I'm not really protective. And there are certain instances like, I think the movies have done this really well, or they'll put in an Easter egg where maybe they didn't go that route that the comics did, but they'll make a little wink of like, for those in the know, though, we know. And one example of that was the Captain America when he leaned in and said "Hail Hydra" in the elevator in Endgame, because in the comics he does get all twisted up with Hydra. Very unpopular plotline, though. So
I know people felt some type of way. And people will feel some type of way, I think, if they actually put that on film.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, but that is the interesting thing. And we are planning on doing Falcon and the Winter Soldier. But that is the interesting thing kind of about that whole show. But one thing I noticed about this is there is a part of me that almost gets sad sometimes that I know how things end.
Yeah.
And I don't want... I'm happy to see it play out and hear other people's excitement. But I think that's one of the reasons why I was talking to you about this, Samantha, where I felt like the show was overrated.
Right.
And I think part of that is I didn't have that same, I was kind of like, yep, this is how it goes. And they did things differently too. Like there were definitely surprises. But in general, I was like, yep, that's it. But also, I'm starting to think that my overrated is other people's normal. Just because I'm super passionate about things.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe.
So I think, like, especially when it comes to like Marvel and Star Wars, I'm like up here all the time and I'm indicating like the ceiling.
Yes.
That if I'm not like up there, then I think it's overrated. But I still like it.
I mean, there's a reason why people want your opinions on this because they know you know.
Right. Mm-hmm.
For sure.
Yeah. And I really think I like it. And I think it's one of those things like maybe even... if I watched it again and I didn't have... because that's another issue of when you have these expectations of how it's going to play out, because you have read stuff, comics or whatever, then you can get in your head about that. And I think they can distract you. Mm-hmm. But yeah, in general, I'm not protective. I think it's good to try new things as long as you don't go like way away from the heart of it. And I'm all for it.
And again, I come from a person who only has watched the movies in story. Mm-hmm. And I've asked you about a few things and I will read about it, like the behind the scenes or other things that you should notice, or here are the Easter eggs. Right. Love that. But I don't know. So for me, like, again, I think Age of Ultron was one of the least liked movies of all time. I liked it. Yeah. And I'm like, maybe it's because I don't quite grasp the level or the depth or how far they fell off of what was being done at that point in time. I don't know. Yeah. Maybe it was a weird accent. I do have a thing about that. I'm like, why do they have this accent? What is this accent? Why does it keep going away? Which again, I do love that they addressed that in WandaVision. Like, what is with this stupid accent? And I appreciate that. But like, I enjoy it for what it is and move on. Of course, I'm also a big James Spader fan. I really hope he's not a creep. I haven't read anything yet about him being a creep. So for now, I'll say that with that caveat.
Yeah.
So I enjoyed him playing Ultron as a sarcastic, nihilistic self in general. So I love that in itself. But yeah, again, I come from a complete different view. Just entertain me, and I'm just going to watch it and moving on.
Yeah. And I do think WandaVision tried something really interesting, like for a format of a show to be pretty weird, where it's, got this kind of The Office themed episode, and it's got sort of a Full House and Brady Bunch themed episode. And I think that was really fun. And I think for a lot of people, that was really, really fun of like, oh yeah, I remember that house, or, from my childhood. And I think that was, again, this is such a huge, profitable, Disney-owned universe. And there's a fear that Disney will be like, you can't try anything interesting anymore.
Right.
So I think that was really cool that they did that. And it was really interesting. And I think it worked really well and people really liked it. And so far, Disney has been pretty willing for those experiments. But I remember when it first came out, people were like, this is weird.
Yeah. I definitely was like, this is slow. What's happening?
Yeah. Because it was so different than Marvel one, but a lot of other shows in general.
Right. I think it was also like the fact that it was satirical in a way that you're like, when are we getting to the point?
Yeah, exactly.
And 2 episodes seemed like a long time.
Yeah, for sure. And then one other thing I really wanted to touch on is, we won't go into depth about this because we talked about it a ton, but motherhood was a big part of this show too.
Right.
Wanda's protective instincts and her desire for these children and to protect these children. So that's something we see again. I feel like one of the areas the show fell down for me, which again, I really liked it, but I think I don't care about Vision.
Aww.
And I really didn't care about her kids.
Oh, no.
And that's just like it wasn't there, like the emotional. And I do think, because I was talking to someone else about this recently, and I do think it's a tough sell to suddenly be in one movie like, okay, Wanda and Vision are together and they're in love, like deeply in love. And you haven't seen any of that. And then in this, it's like, oh, here are our kids and we're in love with them. And I'm like, wait, what?
Right. No, you're right. I feel like the original push for them to be together felt so disingenuous. It was jarring. I think it's come to the point that we all have accepted it. We're like, okay, it's fine. We'll just keep going with it. Yeah. But isn't the next plot point for Wanda these children?
They're a big part of her story. And that was really funny when one of my friends was like, what did she say? Like, no way is she just going to randomly get pregnant and give birth to 2 children, right? I just didn't say anything. I'm like,
yeah, that was ridiculous. I will say that. But again, a willing suspension of disbelief throughout all of these movies.
Oh, sure. I got no problem with that. But I think like all the actors did great. There's no shade to any of them. And Elizabeth Olsen did a really great job of selling, like, maybe I don't care so much about Vision and their relationship, but I believe that she does, and she's grieving, and it's very sad.
Right.
And like when her kids all disappear, it's very, very sad. But that was one of the areas too, because the whole premise of the show was kind of her grief about Vision and her relationship with Vision. So if I wasn't buying into that, I was kind of like, I'm not feeling it as emotionally as I think I should be feeling it.
Right. I mean, again, when we talk about this, even Star Wars, there's a lot of times where like, you just lost someone significant in your life and you're like, I'm sad. Moving on.
So, well, that is the big...
To see someone who actually sits back and be like, no, this is tragic and affects how I think and how I feel and how I impact others. Again, we didn't talk about the trauma. And we talk about that, like, I know that's been a Twitter thing about, what about the townspeople? They kind of deserve justice.
For sure. And no, that's a great point, because I feel like that's something, not to talk about this too much, but as someone who does read like books or comics or sort of this outside entertainment, like I read the whole book about Luke Skywalker's trauma, PTSD. That's not in the movies, but it exists.
Right.
And like the comics and books. And the same is true with Marvel for sure. Like that stuff isn't necessarily made for a 20 to 30 minute weekly show on Disney Plus. I totally get it. But I do think that was one of the things that just didn't work for me personally. And then just to wrap it up, the ending where Wanda learns about her magic, has this grieving moment, lets go, accepts what's happened, or, at least isn't having a false, perfect suburban town anymore. And she goes, and at least from the end credit scene, it seems to indicate she's really taking control of her own destiny, and she's going to learn all about her powers and how to control them. And that was one of the biggest issues some people had with Endgame. Well, not one of the biggest, but she's technically like, if not the most powerful Avenger, she's up there. And so I feel like this is a real jumping off point for her character. So we'll see where it goes.
Right.
Well, that has been the first episode of Spoiled Thursdays.
We started off with, and we don't really have a structure to this. We're just going to talk. And I was like, oh, it's going to be a 30-minute episode. Here we go.
You were absolutely correct. And we could keep going, but alas.
Yes, true.
Alas. If you have any suggestions, listeners, for what we should discuss on Spoiled Thursdays, please send them to us. We're so excited to hear from you. You can email us at stuffmediamomstuff@iheartmedia.com. You can find us on Twitter at momstuffpodcast or on Instagram at Stuff I've Never Told You. Thanks as always to our super producer, Christina.
Thank you.
And thanks to you for listening. Stuff I've Never Told You is a production of iHeartRadio. For more podcasts from iHeartRadio, visit the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.